Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to objectively explore a really fascinating historical source that takes a deep dive right into the origins of Islam. Now, the core argument presented in these historical documents is that Muhammad's monotheism wasn't just formulated out of nowhere in a vacuum. Instead, it was actually a confluence, like a gathering together, of pre-existing regional religious tributaries. So we're going to map out exactly how these completely distinct cultural threads wove together to literally change history, and why understanding this totally shapes how we view the region today.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. 1. The economy of Mecca. 2. The orphans map. 3. The high god's daughters. 4. The southern gods merger. 5. Why not Yahweh? And 6. The pipeline to the cave. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The economy of Mecca. So if we really want to understand the origins of Islam, the research suggests we have to first look at the commercial and religious vibe of 6th century Mecca. This is the city where Muhammad was born into the prominent Quraysh tribe. And listen, the Kaaba there wasn't just a building, it was quite literally his family's business. Picture this. According to historical documents, the pre-Islamic Kaaba wasn't some empty cube at all. It housed exactly 360 tribal idols. Tribes from all over the Arabian Peninsula traveled there, driving this massive, incredibly lucrative pilgrimage economy that Muhammad's own tribe, the Quraysh, directly controlled. And there's this wild story that perfectly captures the mindset of the city he grew up in. Back in the year 570 AD, which, by the way, is the exact year Muhammad was born, an Ethiopian Christian general named Abraha actually marched on Mecca with African war elephants. His plan? Destroy the Kaaba and redirect all that pilgrimage money to his own cathedral in Yemen. But his army was wiped out before they could even reach the city. As it's documented in Surah Al-Fil, Mecca viewed its survival as an absolute act of divine protection. So Muhammad entered a world that already fully believed it was standing under God's protective shield. Moving right along to Section 2, the orphan and the monk. Now, historical records trace Muhammad's early life through a really tragic series of losses. But those losses ultimately exposed him to profound external theological influences. He definitely wasn't shaped by just one stable household with a single theological framework. It's literally an orphan's map that passed Muhammad forward from one guardian to the next. And a quick side note here, notice his father's name Abdullah. That translates to servant of Allah, which shows us that the name Allah was actually already in pagan use well before Muhammad was even born. Ultimately, he ended up being raised by his merchant uncle Abu Talib. And this is key, because his uncle's trade routes north into Byzantine Syria acted as a direct pipeline for entirely new religious concepts to reach the young Muhammad. So what happens on one of those trade runs up north? Well, according to classical Islamic historians like Ibn Hisham, it was during a Syrian trade journey that a Nestorian Christian monk named Bahira examined the young Muhammad. Bahira actually used Christian prophetic vocabulary to attach a prophetic identity to the boy. Consciously or not, the evidence suggests a Christian theological framework was planted in him during this very trip to Byzantine Syria. Which brings us to Section 3, the high god's daughters. Let's look at how this builds into the Meccan theology Muhammad actually inherited. Pre-Islamic Meccan belief wasn't a pure monotheism at all. The source describes it as a corrupted, kind of domesticated hierarchy. Basically, it's a giant religious mashup, what historians call syncretism. Two different religious systems bleeding together over time to produce a hybrid. They elevated Allah as the supreme high god, sure, but they simultaneously accommodated local pagan tribal goddesses. And why? To protect their massive tribal religious economy. You keep the high god, you keep the local tribal goddesses, and boom, everyone's pilgrimage business stays totally intact. Muhammad's local worlds actively worshipped these three specific daughters of Allah: Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. Interestingly enough, classical Islamic scholars like al-Tabari point out that Muhammad even temporarily accepted these goddesses as valid intercessors in his early preaching, which obviously pleased the local tribes before he famously retracted those verses, calling them satanic insertions. All right, Section 4, the southern god merger. So while Muhammad was busy stripping out the idols and the daughters up in the north, another really crucial religious tributary was flowing up from the Himyarite kingdom in southern Arabia, basically modern-day Yemen. The inscriptional evidence on this is super clear. You actually had two distinct regional deities reaching toward monotheism, but from totally different geographic directions. Up north around Mecca, the high god was Allah, but
But 500 miles south, the Himyarite kingdom practiced a bare monotheism centered around a deity they called Al-Rahman, which means the merciful.
And here is where it gets absolutely fascinating. That famous Islamic formula that opens almost every single chapter of the Quran, it functioned as a brilliant strategic and theological merger. In the name of Allah, the northern god, and Al-Rahman, the southern god, Muhammad effectively absorbed the southern tradition and just folded it seamlessly into his northern Arabian framework.
Section 5. Why not Yahweh? Now this brings up a massive question. If Muhammad was claiming a return to pure monotheism, and he's heavily borrowing Jewish and Christian textual narratives to build out his theology, why didn't he just use the Hebrew name for God?
It's a really profound strategic question, and the source answers it in a couple of layers. From a linguistic standpoint, Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews already used Allah as the regional word for God, since it shares a root with the Hebrew El. But there was a much deeper, far more strategic reason for actively avoiding Hebrew names like Yahweh or Elohim.
The source argues it's all about authority. Muhammad needed the monotheistic God, but he absolutely did not want the Jewish institutional gatekeepers. Using Yahweh would have implicitly subordinated his new movement to the authority of Jewish rabbis and pre-existing scriptures. By using Allah, he claimed continuity with Abraham while repackaging all that borrowed narrative content into a distinctly, independently Arab wrapper. Essentially, he changed the wrapper, but not the contents. To put the strategic distance into perspective, think about this geographical fact recorded in Sahih Bukhari. For the first 16 to 17 months of the movement, the very first Muslims actually prayed toward Jerusalem, not Mecca.
But check this out. Despite praying in that direction for well over a year, Jerusalem is never explicitly named in the Quran. When the local Jewish tribes rejected his prophetic claims, the prayer direction pivoted straight to Mecca. Textual analysis points to this pattern of preemptive defense, a concept known as kitman. Muhammad justified pivoting away from Jerusalem by claiming the people of the book secretly knew he was right all along, but were just stubbornly suppressing the truth. It's a pretty fascinating way to distance the new movement from the original textual authorities. And finally, Section 6, the pipeline to the cave. Let's pull all these puzzle pieces together at the famous cave on Jabal al-Nur, where Muhammad first claimed revelation at 40 years old. The main idea here is that Muhammad definitely wasn't a theological blank slate. He lived in a society alongside Hanifs. These were thinkers like Zayd ibn Amr and Waraka ibn Nawfal, who were already rejecting idols and independently searching for the pure religion of Abraham. These monotheistic concepts weren't just dropping out of thin air. They were already in the cultural water he'd been drinking his entire life. So rather than formulating Islam in a vacuum, the conclusion drawn by the source is that Muhammad was essentially the ultimate prepared receiver. He was sitting right at the confluence of four incredibly powerful regional tributaries. He was prepared by geography, by his early exposure to trade routes, by those southern Arabian mergers, and by the intellectual currents buzzing around his own city. I want to leave you with this one final, really provocative thought from the source. When Muhammad fled that cave in absolute terror, he didn't run to a rabbi, and he didn't run to a tribal elder. His wife took him straight to her cousin Waraka, who just happened to be part of the exact same Syrian Nestorian Christian network that first identified Muhammad as a boy in Busra. It was Waraka who provided the theological vocabulary to validate his final prophethood. It is a massive historical thread, and one we hope leaves you eager to dig in and explore further. Thanks for hanging out with us for this explainer.